The guardian of forgotten shores. The oceans of Neridia shimmered with an otherworldly glow, waves cresting with luminescent foam that painted the shoreline in ghostly blue. This was the forgotten edge of civilized space, a planet deliberately erased from official star charts after the Meridian conflict. Most considered it uninhabitable. Toxic spores, unpredictable tides, and strange electromagnetic anomalies made it a death trap for the unprepared. Most were wrong. Lyra moved along the phosphorescent shoreline, her footprints lingering briefly in the sand before the tide erased all evidence of her passage. Her skin reflected the ocean's glow, not merely catching the light but amplifying it, pulsing with its own inner radiance. The markings that spiraled across her arms and face, intricate patterns telling the story of her lineage, glowed with a soft amber warmth that contrasted with the cool blues around her. The fins that extended from her forearms and calves rippled slightly in the breeze, translucent and sensitive to the slightest shift in air pressure. Her eyes, large and without pupils, scanned the horizon with precision that human technology could never match. She wasn't human. She was Neridian, the last of her kind on this world, perhaps the last anywhere. The sound came without warning, a high-pitched whine cutting through the atmosphere, followed by the unmistakable roar of failing engines. Lyra's head tilted upward, her bioluminescent patterns flaring with alarm as she tracked the plummeting object. "Not again," she murmured, her voice melodic yet weary. The craft, small and clearly not built for atmospheric entry, carved an angry orange scar across the twilight sky before disappearing behind the crystal formations that loomed along the coastline. The impact came seconds later, the ground trembling beneath her feet. Her first instinct was to retreat to her sanctuary, a cavern system she'd carefully cultivated over decades of solitude. Visitors meant complications. They meant questions. They meant fear once they saw what she was. And yet, she found herself moving toward the crash site, drawn by a curiosity she thought she'd long since buried. The wreckage smoldered against the crystalline backdrop, steam rising as hot metal met the damp night air. The craft was small, a personal transport or perhaps a scout vessel, its hull bearing the insignia of the Terran Exploration Guild. Lyra approached cautiously, her patterns dimming to near invisibility as she moved through the shadows. A hatch creaked open, dislodging debris that clattered to the ground. A gloved hand appeared, followed by an arm, and then a figure pulled itself from the wreckage with surprising agility. "Well," said a deep voice that managed to sound both pained and amused, "that's the last time I try to land during an ion storm." The human, male by the sound of his voice, stumbled a few steps from his craft before dropping to one knee. He removed his helmet, revealing a face that might have been handsome by human standards, angular features, skin the color of rich soil, and curly hair cropped close to his scalp. A fresh cut across his temple leaked crimson. Lyra remained motionless, partially concealed behind a crystal formation. Years of isolation had taught her caution, years of history had taught her fear. The human was examining something on his wrist, a scanner or communicator, when his head suddenly snapped up. His eyes narrowed as he peered into the darkness. "I know someone's there," he called out. "I can hear you breathing." Lyra hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until that moment. She released it slowly, her patterns brightening involuntarily with her anxiety. The human's eyes widened as the glow illuminated her form. He reached for something at his hip, a weapon, undoubtedly, but winced as the movement pulled at some unseen injury. "You're hurt," Lyra said, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertones of her species. The human froze, his hand still hovering near his weapon. "Just a few bruises," he replied cautiously. "Nothing terminal." He paused, studying her with open fascination. "You're Neridian." She stepped fully into view now, her patterns cycling through shades of amber and gold as she assessed him. "And you're trespassing." The human had the audacity to smile. "Dominic Lancaster," he said, relaxing his posture and raising both hands in a gesture of peace. "Cartographer for the guild. And yes, definitely trespassing, though not intentionally." "Cartographer?" Lyra's patterns flickered with suspicion. This planet was removed from all charts by decree of the Meridian Council. There's nothing to map. Dominic's smile faltered. That's complicated. May I know your name? Lyra. Just Lyra. The rest of my name would be unpronounceable to you. She gestured to his injured leg. You need medical attention. I've got supplies in my ship, he said, attempting to stand and immediately grimacing. If the crash didn't destroy them. Lyra hesitated. The sensible course would be to let him tend to his own wounds and wait for whatever rescue would surely come. Involving herself would only lead to complications. And yet. My sanctuary is nearby, she found herself saying. I have remedies that will work better than your Terran medicines. Dominic looked surprised by the offer. That's unexpectedly kind. Don't mistake practicality for kindness, she replied. Dead humans tend to attract attention. I prefer my solitude undisturbed. He laughed, a short, startled sound. Fair enough. Lead the way, then. She helped him stand, carefully avoiding direct contact with his skin. The walk to her sanctuary was slow, punctuated by Dominic's attempts at conversation and Lyra's terse responses. By the time they reached the hidden entrance, a narrow fissure in the cliff face that opened into a vast cavern system, night had fully descended. The interior of the sanctuary was a stark contrast to the wild beauty outside. Carefully cultivated bioluminescent fungi provided soft illumination, revealing a space that blended organic forms with salvaged technology. Crystal formations had been shaped into furniture and storage. A water purification system hummed quietly in one corner. This is incredible, Dominic said, his eyes wide as he took in his surroundings. Lyra gestured for him to sit on a curved surface that functioned as a chair. It's survival. She gathered supplies, a paste made from crushed marine plants, strips of processed seaweed that functioned as bandages, a vial of clear liquid that smelled faintly of salt and something sharper. This will sting, she warned, applying the paste to the gash on his temple. Dominic hissed but remained still. Thank you. They sat in silence as she worked, tending to his injuries with efficient movements. His leg had a deep contusion, but nothing appeared broken. You have medical training, he observed. I've had time to learn many things. How long have you been here? Alone, I mean. Lyra's patterns dimmed slightly. 11 cycles by your calendar. Since the evacuation. The council said all Neridians were relocated after the incident. That none remained. The council says many things, she replied, securing the last bandage. Most of them convenient half-truths. Dominic studied her, his dark eyes thoughtful. Why stay? This is my home. Her patterns shifted to a deeper amber, her equivalent of a frown. Why are you really here, cartographer? This planet has no strategic value, no resources worth harvesting. He hesitated, then reached into a pocket of his flight suit, withdrawing a small device. With a tap, it projected a holographic image, a geological survey map of the region. Something's happening to Neridia, he said. Subterranean shifts, increasing electromagnetic anomalies. The guild detected it by chance during a routine scan of the sector. He paused. The council doesn't know I'm here. Lyra's patterns flared with alarm. You're saying the planet is dying. I'm saying it's changing. I was hoping to gather more data, but... He gestured vaguely toward the direction of his crashed ship. The storms have been growing worse, she admitted. The tides more unpredictable. Dominic nodded. My emergency beacon is still functional. A recovery team will arrive within a standard cycle, maybe 2. But I'd like to complete my survey if possible. He looked at her directly. With your help. Why would I help you? The last time humans took an interest in Neridia's geology, my people lost their world. Because something tells me you don't want to lose it a second time, he replied softly. Lyra turned away, moving to the entrance of the cavern. Outside, the ocean continued its relentless rhythm, waves breaking against the shore in patterns she'd memorized over years of solitude. This human knew nothing of loss, nothing of the weight of being the last, the guardian of memories no one else carried. "You should rest," she said finally. "We'll speak more in the morning." She expected him to press further, but instead, he simply nodded. "Thank you again," he said. "For not leaving me out there." Lyra didn't respond, but her patterns shifted to a softer hue as she retreated to her private chamber deeper in the cavern system. That night, she dreamed of the evacuation ships rising into the atmosphere, carrying her people to scattered refugee settlements across the galaxy. She dreamed of her decision to stay behind, to become the keeper of Neridia's secrets. In her dream, as in reality, she stood on the shore and watched the ships until they were nothing but pinpricks of light against the darkening sky. But this time, in the dream, she was not alone. A human figure stood beside her, watching the same vanishing lights. She woke with her patterns glowing brighter than they had in years. Morning brought clarity and caution. Lyra found Dominic already awake, examining the various plants she cultivated in shallow pools throughout the main cavern. "These are hybrids," he observed as she approached. "Terrestrial grafted with native species. The native flora died with the changing atmosphere," she explained. "Adaptation was necessary." He turned to face her, his expression earnest. "That's what your people could have done, adapted. Instead, the council forced evacuation. It wasn't that simple. It never is." He stood, testing his injured leg and finding it much improved. "You're a remarkable healer. And you're remarkably persistent," she countered. "Have you considered that I might not want your help? That I might prefer you leave as soon as your rescue arrives?" Dominic smiled, an expression that reached his eyes and created small creases at their corners. "I have. But I also think you're curious. You want to know what's happening to your world." Before she could respond, a low rumble vibrated through the cavern. Dust and small crystal fragments rained down from the ceiling. Dominic's smile vanished as he braced himself against a nearby wall. "That's the third tremor since dawn," he said once the shaking subsided. "They're getting stronger." Lyra's patterns flickered with concern. "There's a monitoring station on the eastern peninsula. It was abandoned during the evacuation, but some systems might still function. Can you take me there?" She hesitated, then nodded. "After we check your ship. Your survey equipment will be more reliable than decade-old technology." They set out as the twin suns climbed higher in the sky, following a path that wound along the coastline. Lyra moved with the fluid grace of her species, occasionally needing to slow her pace for Dominic to keep up. Despite his injury, he maintained a steady rhythm, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with professional interest. "The crystalline structure shouldn't be this close to the water," he observed at one point. According to old surveys, they were primarily inland formations. "They've been growing," Lyra confirmed. "Expanding toward the ocean. I've watched them advance nearly 20 meters in the last cycle alone." As they approached the crash site, another tremor shook the ground, this one strong enough to send them both to their knees. A high-pitched keening filled the air, the sound of crystal under stress. "We need to move," Lyra warned, her patterns flashing urgent warning colors. "Now." They scrambled away from the crystal formations just as one massive structure shattered, sending razor-sharp shards flying in all directions. Dominic threw himself forward, knocking Lyra to the ground and covering her body with his own as crystal fragments rained down around them. When the chaos subsided, he lifted himself slightly, looking down at her with concern. "Are you hurt?" Lyra stared up at him, shocked by the protective gesture. No human had willingly touched her in over a decade, let alone risked injury to shield her. "No," she managed. "But you are." A sliver of crystal had embedded itself in his shoulder, blood seeping into the fabric of his flight suit. He grimaced as he rolled to the side, allowing her to sit up. "Worth it," he said through gritted teeth. Those shards would have torn right through your membrane structures. Lyra carefully examined the wound. It needs to come out. Go ahead. She wrapped her fingers around the crystal shard, her touch gentle but firm. On 3. 1, she pulled it free in one swift motion. Dominic yelped. That wasn't 3. Anticipation makes it worse, she said, already applying pressure to the wound. We need to return to the sanctuary. This requires proper treatment. But my equipment will still be here later. If you survive. He looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. Lead the way. Back at the sanctuary, Lyra worked methodically to clean and treat his new injury. The wound was deep but had missed anything vital. As she applied a sealing agent that would speed healing, Dominic watched her with curious eyes. You said humans fear you, he said quietly. But I think it's the other way around. Her patterns flickered defensively. I have every reason to fear your kind. And yet you're helping me. He reached out, his hand hovering near but not touching her luminescent arm. Maybe we're both wrong about who should fear whom. Lyra completed her work in silence, her mind turbulent with conflicting thoughts. This human confused her. His kindness, his curiosity, his lack of disgust or fear at her alienness, all of it challenged the protective barriers she'd built around herself over years of isolation. Rest, she instructed, rising to her feet. I'll check on your ship. Lyra, he called as she reached the entrance. She paused but didn't turn. Thank you. Outside, the twin suns cast long shadows across the crystalline landscape. Lyra moved swiftly toward the crash site, her patterns dimmed to near invisibility, a habit of caution she couldn't shake even here, where she was supposedly alone. Except she wasn't alone anymore. And that realization frightened her more than any planetary change ever could. Beyond the shimmer. Dawn broke over Neridia with an unsettling brilliance. The atmosphere rippled with prismatic distortions, casting fractured rainbows across the crystalline landscape. Lyra stood at the edge of her sanctuary, watching as the twin suns climbed higher, their light refracting through the increasingly unstable air. Something was wrong. The ocean tides had retreated further than she'd ever witnessed, exposing ancient ruins and dormant crystal formations along the shore. In the distance, new crystalline structures had erupted overnight, jutting skyward like accusing fingers. The patterns are changing, Dominic said, joining her at the entrance. His wounded shoulder was wrapped in bioluminescent bandages that pulsed softly in rhythm with his heartbeat. You should be resting. Hard to rest when the planet's having a tantrum. He gestured toward the horizon. Your world is reorganizing itself on a molecular level. The question is why? Lyra's fins rippled with unease. We need to reach your ship. They moved cautiously through the transformed landscape. Crystal formations that had been stable for years now hummed with energy, vibrating at frequencies that made Lyra's sensitive membranes ache. The ground beneath their feet shifted subtly with each step, as if the very soil was liquefying and resolidifying in rapid succession. When they reached the crash site, Dominic's expression fell. His ship, already damaged from the landing, had been partially consumed by the crystalline growth, glittering protrusions erupting through the hull like beautiful parasites. Well, he said with forced lightness, that complicates things. Lyra approached the craft, her patterns dimming with concentration as she studied the integration of crystal and metal. The ship's core is still intact, she observed. We might be able to retrieve your equipment. Dominic nodded, following her lead as they carefully navigated the transformed wreckage. The interior had been largely spared, though crystal tendrils had begun creeping along the walls. He quickly gathered his survey tools, a portable scanner, data modules, and a compact communication unit. My emergency beacon is still active, he confirmed, checking the diagnostics. Signals being received, but response time is fluctuating wildly. The atmospheric distortions, Lyra said. They're interfering with transmission. A tremor shook the ground, more violent than the previous ones. Crystal shards rained down around them as the ship groaned under the strain of its parasitic growth. "We need to move," Dominic urged, slinging his equipment bag over his good shoulder. "This whole structure could collapse." They retreated to a safer distance just as another section of the hull buckled under the crystalline assault. Dominic immediately began setting up his equipment, deploying sensors that hovered on anti-gravity fields, forming a networked array. "These will give us a three-dimensional map of the subsurface activity," he explained as the devices synced with his main console. "If we can understand the pattern of the tremors, we might." He fell silent as the data began flowing across the holographic display. Lyra moved closer, her patterns brightening with interest as she studied the complex readings. "These energy signatures," she said, pointing to fluctuating nodes deep beneath the surface. "They're similar to the natural core resonance of our sacred sites." Dominic looked at her, brow furrowed. "Sacred sites? Places where the planet's energy naturally concentrates. My people built our most important structures at these junctions." Her fingers traced the holographic representation. "But these readings suggest the junctions are shifting, realigning." "Like a reset," Dominic murmured. "The planet is trying to restore balance." Another tremor, stronger than before, interrupted them. The scanner array wavered but held its position. The holographic display flickered, then stabilized to show a disturbing new development. The energy patterns were converging, moving toward a central point several kilometers inland. "We need to get to the monitoring station," Lyra said urgently. "It's closest to the convergence point." They packed up the equipment and set off along a path that wound through increasingly unstable terrain. The crystalline growths were more aggressive here, erupting from the ground with audible cracks and forming bridges and archways that shifted even as they watched. "Your people knew this would happen, didn't they?" Dominic asked as they navigated the treacherous landscape. "That's why the evacuation was so absolute." Lyra's patterns cycled through shades of deep amber, sadness, regret. "The council knew something was changing, but they feared it rather than sought to understand. They saw the preliminary shifts as catastrophic rather than transformative. And you stayed to witness the transformation." She glanced at him. "I stayed because Neridia is my home. Because someone needed to bear witness, to remember what was lost, and what might yet be born." The monitoring station appeared ahead, a weathered structure built into the side of a cliff. Unlike the sleek ships and artificial habitats humans preferred, Neridian architecture grew organically from its surroundings, the building seeming to emerge from the rock itself like a natural formation. As they approached, Lyra's steps slowed. She hadn't returned to this place since the evacuation, when she'd watched the last of her kind depart for the stars. The memories pressed against her consciousness, the panic, the grief, the final, desperate pleas for her to join them. "Lyra?" Dominic's voice drew her back to the present. His expression was gentle, understanding. "We don't have to do this if it's too difficult." She straightened, her patterns shifting to resolute blue. "It's not about difficulty. It's about necessity." The entrance to the station was partially blocked by fallen debris, but they managed to clear enough space to squeeze through. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. Bioluminescent panels that had once illuminated the space now glowed weakly, responding to Lyra's presence after years of dormancy. "The system should still function," she said, moving toward the central control area. "Our technology is designed to last centuries if properly maintained." Dominic followed, his gaze roaming over the organic curves and flowing lines of the station's architecture. "It's beautiful," he remarked. "Like being inside a living organism." That was the intention. "Our buildings were extensions of ourselves, connected to our consciousness." She placed her hand on a smooth panel, and it illuminated beneath her touch, recognizing her biological signature. Even after all this time. The station slowly awakened around them, systems initializing with soft hums and gentle pulses of light. The main monitoring array, a crystalline structure that dominated the center of the room, flickered to life, projecting a three-dimensional map of the surrounding area. "It's still receiving data," Lyra said with surprise, manipulating the controls to expand the display. And storing it. All these years. Together they studied the accumulated information, decade-long records of seismic activity, atmospheric composition, and crystalline growth patterns. When integrated with Dominic's fresh readings, a clear picture emerged. The cycle is accelerating, he observed. What should have taken centuries is happening in months. Lyra nodded, her patterns flickering with rapid calculations. The convergence point, it's the ancient temple complex. The heart of Neridia's energy network. Another tremor shook the station, stronger than any before. Crystalline equipment shattered, raining fragments across the floor. A support beam cracked, sending a section of the ceiling crashing down mere meters from where they stood. "We need to leave," Dominic urged, grabbing her arm. "This whole structure could come down." "Not yet." Lyra moved quickly to another console, her fingers flying over the controls. "I need to download the complete dataset. If we're going to understand what's happening, we need everything." As she worked, Dominic monitored the structural integrity of the station through his portable scanner. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster," he warned. "We've got maybe minutes before this place collapses." Lyra completed the transfer just as another violent tremor hit, this one accompanied by a high-pitched resonance that made her fins quiver painfully. She disconnected the data module and they raced for the exit, dodging falling debris and crystal shards that erupted spontaneously from the walls. They emerged into chaos. The landscape around them was transforming rapidly, crystal formations growing and collapsing in an accelerating cycle. The sky above had taken on an opalescent sheen, the atmosphere itself seeming to solidify in patches. "This way," Lyra shouted over the tumult, leading Dominic toward higher ground. They scrambled up a rise just as the monitoring station collapsed behind them, folding in on itself like a dying star. From their elevated position, they could see for kilometers in all directions. The transformation was happening everywhere, the coastline reshaping, mountains shifting, crystal forests rising and falling like waves on an ocean. And at the center of it all, the ancient temple complex glowed with increasing intensity. "It's beautiful," Dominic breathed, his expression a mixture of awe and scientific fascination. "Terrifying, but beautiful." Lyra's patterns pulsed with a complex emotion for which humans had no name, a combination of reverence, fear, and profound connection. "It's rebirth," she said softly. "Neridia is remaking itself." They watched in silence as the phenomenon continued, neither willing to look away from the planet-wide metamorphosis. After some time, Dominic's communication unit beeped with an incoming signal. "It's the rescue team," he said, reading the display. "They've locked onto my beacon. Estimated arrival, 4 hours." Lyra felt something cold settle in her core. So soon. The atmospheric disturbances must have cleared enough for them to accelerate their approach. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You could come with me." "What?" "Come with me," he repeated, more firmly this time. "There's nothing that says you have to stay here alone." She turned away, her patterns dimming. "This is my home. A home that's transforming into something new, something potentially uninhabitable, even for you." He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Lyra, you've been the guardian of this world for 11 years. You've witnessed what no one else has. But you don't have to face what comes next alone. And what do you propose? That I join your guild? Become a specimen for them to study?" "I propose you have a choice," he said simply. "For the first time in 11 years, you have options beyond solitude." Another tremor interrupted them, nearly sending them both to their knees. The crystal formations around them shuddered, some collapsing while others grew at impossible speeds. In the distance, the glow from the temple complex intensified. "We need to return to the sanctuary," Lyra decided. "It's the most stable location we've seen." They made their way back carefully, navigating a landscape that seemed increasingly alien even to Lyra. By the time they reached the cavern system, the twin suns were setting, casting elongated shadows through the crystalline forest. Inside the sanctuary, Lyra transferred the data module's contents to her own systems, combining it with historical records she'd maintained during her solitary vigil. The resulting analysis confirmed what she'd suspected. The planet is entering the final phase of its transformation, she explained, showing Dominic the projections. Within days, perhaps hours, the process will culminate at the temple complex. And then? I don't know, she admitted. Nothing in our records describes what comes after. My people always believed that Neridia was sentient in its own way, that the planet itself possessed consciousness. Perhaps this is its awakening. Dominic studied the data, his expression thoughtful. If your people were here, what would they do? They would witness, Lyra replied without hesitation. They would stand at the temple and bear witness to the transformation, whatever it may bring. He nodded, as if her answer confirmed something for him. Then that's what we should do. Lyra's patterns flickered with surprise. Your rescue team. We'll wait, he finished. Or follow us. Either way, I didn't come all this way to miss the most significant planetary transformation ever recorded. She studied him, this human who had crashed into her solitary existence and upended everything she thought she knew about his kind. Why do you care so much about a world that isn't yours? Dominic's expression softened. Because you care about it. Because it matters. Because some things transcend politics and species and old prejudices. He shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at his wounded shoulder. And because I'm insatiably curious. It's a cartographer thing. Despite everything, Lyra found herself smiling, a subtle shift in her facial structures that she hadn't exercised in years. They prepared through the night, gathering supplies and plotting the safest route to the temple complex. Dominic contacted the rescue team, updating them on the situation and their planned expedition. To Lyra's surprise, they agreed to rendezvous at the temple coordinates rather than insisting on immediate evacuation. I might have emphasized the unprecedented scientific opportunity, Dominic admitted with a grin. Guild researchers can be predictable that way. As dawn approached, a new tremor sequence began, more regular than before, almost rhythmic. The crystal formations throughout the sanctuary began to resonate in harmony with the vibrations, creating an ethereal melody that Lyra hadn't heard since childhood. The chorus of alignment, she whispered, her patterns brightening with recognition. The old legends speak of it, a harmonic convergence that precedes great change. Dominic listened, his expression one of wonder. It's like the planet is singing. It is. She turned to him, suddenly decisive. We need to leave now. The final phase is beginning. They departed as the first rays of sunlight breached the horizon, illuminating a world transformed overnight. The path to the temple complex would normally have taken days to traverse, but the reshaping landscape had created new routes, crystal bridges spanning chasms and elevated pathways cutting through dense growth. As they traveled, Lyra found herself sharing stories of her people, their customs, their beliefs, their deep connection to Neridia. Dominic listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that revealed his respect for her culture. Your people believe that consciousness permeates everything, he observed as they paused to rest. Not unlike some Earth philosophies. The difference, Lyra replied, is that my people could perceive it directly. Our evolutionary path included the ability to sense the subtle energies that flow through all things. Is that why you glow? You're channeling that energy? She nodded. Our patterns are an external manifestation of our connection to the world around us. They reflect our emotional states, yes, but also our resonance with the planetary consciousness. And right now, he asked, gesturing to the complex patterns shifting across her skin. Lyra hesitated, then answered honestly, anticipation. Wonder. Fear. She paused. Hope. They continued their journey, the crystalline chorus growing louder as they approached the temple complex. By midday, they could see their destination, an ancient structure built atop a natural energy nexus, its crystalline spires now pulsing with light that seemed to bend reality around it. The final approach was treacherous. The ground undulated beneath their feet, forcing them to move carefully, helping each other across unstable terrain. When Dominic nearly fell into a suddenly opening crevasse, Lyra grabbed his hand without thinking, pulling him to safety. The physical contact sent a shock through her system, not unpleasant, but intense. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them: understanding, recognition, connection. They reached the temple as the twin suns began their descent. The ancient structure had been transformed, crystal growths extending its original architecture into impossible geometries that seemed to fold back on themselves. The central plaza, once a gathering place for Neridian ceremonies, now housed a pulsing core of pure energy, neither solid nor liquid nor gas, but something that existed between states. The convergence point, Lyra breathed, her patterns synchronizing with the temple's rhythmic pulse. Dominic checked his instruments, eyes widening at the readings. These energy levels are off the charts. The transformation is accelerating toward some kind of critical threshold. A new sound reached them, the distant hum of approaching engines. The rescue ship had arrived, hovering at a safe distance from the temple complex. "They're here," Dominic said, watching as the guild vessel maintained position above the transformed landscape. His communicator beeped with an incoming message. "They're advising immediate evacuation. The energy readings are making them nervous." Lyra stood at the edge of the central plaza, her gaze fixed on the pulsing core. "It's too late to leave. We're witnesses now." The transformation accelerated around them. Crystal formations grew and shifted at impossible speeds, creating a living architecture that seemed to breathe with the planet's rhythm. The atmosphere above the temple thinned and thickened in waves, creating a window to the stars even as daylight still painted the horizon. "What's happening?" Dominic asked, moving to stand beside her. "I don't know," Lyra admitted. "But I think Neridia is waking up." The pulsing core expanded suddenly, sending a wave of energy rippling outward. As it passed through them, Lyra gasped, her patterns flaring with unprecedented brightness. Dominic staggered but remained upright, his expression one of awe rather than fear. "Did you feel that?" he asked, his voice hushed. She nodded, unable to speak. The sensation had been like nothing she'd ever experienced, as if, for a moment, her consciousness had expanded beyond her physical form to touch something vast and ancient and knowing. The phenomenon repeated, waves of energy pulsing outward at increasing frequency. With each wave, the transformation of the landscape accelerated, the crystalline chorus growing louder and more complex. Lyra's patterns shifted in response, resonating with the planet's song. "It's communicating," she realized suddenly. "The planet, it's trying to speak." Dominic looked at her, then back at the pulsing core. "Can you understand it?" She closed her eyes, focusing on the sensations flowing through her. Not words, impressions. Change. Renewal. Purpose. Her eyes opened, meeting his. Invitation. Another energy wave passed through them, stronger than before. This time, both of them heard it, not with their ears but with something deeper, more fundamental, a voice that was not a voice, speaking in a language that existed before words. "Witnesses," it seemed to say. "Bearers of memory." The cycle turns again. The rescue ship began broadcasting urgent evacuation orders, detecting the mounting energy surge. Dominic's communicator beeped incessantly, but he ignored it, transfixed by the unfolding miracle before them. "The cycle," Lyra whispered. The ancient text spoke of a great cycle, a planetary metamorphosis that happens once in many lifetimes. Her patterns pulsed with sudden understanding. This isn't destruction. It's evolution. The pulsing core began to expand more rapidly, its light intensifying to near-blinding levels. The crystalline chorus reached a crescendo, vibrating at frequencies that resonated with something primal in both of them. "Dominic," Lyra said urgently, turning to face him. "You need to go." The ship. I'm not leaving you, he replied, his expression resolute. This is what I stayed for. To witness. To understand. Her patterns shifted to a soft, warm glow. But you have a choice. He took her hand, his grip firm and unhesitating. I've made it. The core's expansion accelerated, energy waves pulsing outward in rapid succession. Each wave brought with it new sensation, insights, memories, knowledge that had been encoded in the planet's consciousness for millennia. Lyra's patterns synchronized perfectly with the pulses, her body becoming a conduit for Neridia's awakening. Through their joined hands, Dominic felt it too, the ancient awareness unfurling, reaching out to touch their minds with gentle curiosity. There was no malice in it, no danger, only the vast, patient intelligence of something that measured time in geological epochs rather than human lifespans. Change comes, the non-voice communicated. The path divides. Choose. The rescue ship made one final attempt to contact them, then retreated to a safer distance as the energy readings continued to climb beyond measurable levels. The choice was clear: stay and become part of whatever transformation was occurring, or leave and observe from a distance. Lyra looked at Dominic, her patterns reflecting the complexity of her emotions. You can still go. They'll wait for you. He shook his head, a smile forming on his lips. Some things are worth the risk. His hand tightened around hers. I'm staying. The core expanded to its maximum extent, encompassing the entire temple complex in a sphere of shimmering energy. Time seemed to slow, then stop altogether. In that suspended moment, Lyra felt a presence envelop them, ancient, curious, and profoundly alive. Witness, it communicated. Remember. Carry this forward. Then, with a soundless pulse that they felt rather than heard, the energy sphere collapsed inward, condensing into a single point of blinding brilliance before exploding outward in a wave of transformation that swept across the planet's surface. The landscape shifted one final time, not in chaos but in perfect harmony, crystals rearranging themselves into new patterns, the ground settling into fresh contours, the atmosphere stabilizing into a composition that shimmered with potential. The twin suns, momentarily eclipsed by the energy wave, re-emerged to illuminate a world reborn. Where the temple had stood, a new structure now rose, a crystalline spire that pulsed with gentle light, connected to a network of similar formations that stretched to the horizon in all directions. The air felt different, charged with possibility, vibrant with life. Lyra and Dominic found themselves standing in the center of the transformed plaza, still holding hands, their bodies tingling with residual energy. The communicator, miraculously still functioning, crackled with amazed voices from the rescue ship, reporting on the planetary metamorphosis they just witnessed from orbit. Are you okay? Dominic asked, studying her with concern. Lyra nodded, her patterns cycling through colors of wonder and revelation. I understand now, she said softly. Neridia wasn't dying. It was evolving, becoming something new. She looked around at the transformed landscape. And it wanted witnesses. What happens now? He asked, still holding her hand as if afraid she might disappear. She turned to him, her patterns settling into a warm, steady glow. Now we have choices. I can stay and continue as guardian of this new Neridia. You can return to your guild with knowledge no human has ever possessed. Or, he prompted, sensing there was more. Or we both stay. Or we both go. Her free hand gestured to the rescue ship now cautiously approaching. For the first time in 11 years, I'm not bound by solitude or duty. Neridia has released me from my vigil. Dominic smiled, the expression lighting his face in a way that made Lyra's patterns flicker with an emotion she was only beginning to recognize. So the guardian of forgotten shores might become an explorer of new horizons? Perhaps, she replied, her own lips curving in an unfamiliar but not unpleasant way. With the right guide. As the rescue ship landed at the edge of the transformed plaza, Lyra felt something she hadn't experienced since before the evacuation: possibility. The future stretched before her not as an endless continuation of solitary duty, but as an uncharted territory filled with potential. "Ready to introduce yourself to the guild?" Dominic asked as they walked toward the waiting ship. Lyra's patterns brightened with determination. "Ready to introduce them to Neridia. The true Neridia." He laughed, the sound blending perfectly with the crystalline chorus that still played softly around them. "They won't know what hit them." Together they